The mainstream media is doing everything in their power to run damage control for Mark Carney and the Liberal Party.
Do you think it's fair to pin the blame? And I understand contrasting, for example, what's happening versus what they said they would do. But do you think it's fair to pin entirely the blame, for example, for that exodus of investment on this government's actions? We have never faced a U.S. president that has leveled the kinds of economic threats that he has against our country. He has specifically targeted investment as a cause for that, saying, I want investment to come to the United States. That's part of the reason I'm doing this. Like, is it not normal that companies would then follow suit when they're faced with that threat? Is it fair, really, to put all the blame at the government's feet?
You know what I think is fair? Let's hold Mr. Carney to the standard he set for himself. He said he'd have a deal with Trump by July 21st. Still no deal. He said that he would put elbows up. He put elbows down. He said he could handle Donald Trump, and all he's done is make concession after concession on his own economic decisions. Mr. Carney said he would spend less. His deficit spending is 100% more. He said that he would bring more investment, and we've had a record exodus of investment since he became Prime Minister. And finally, Canadian business leaders through the Business Council have said that Mark Carney's regulations and red tape are actually more damaging to the economy, even more damaging than Donald Trump's policies. And that's why, despite Mr. Carney's promise that he would make us the fastest growing economy in the G7, we're now the fastest shrinking economy. And on one last point, he's in Mexico, or just coming back from Mexico. Great laboratory, right? Because we're both next door to the United States of America. So how have we both done relatively? In the most recent quarter, Mexico's economy grew by an impressive 2.4%, while regrettably ours shrunk by 1.6. Mexican exports to the U.S. are up, while ours have collapsed by 18%. And of course, Canadian unemployment, I regret to say, is 3 times higher than Mexico. So Mexico has the same problem. We both share America as our neighbor and biggest trading partner. So what have the Mexicans done right that Mark Carney's done wrong?
Well, the Mexicans capitulated to Trump. They didn't.
So is Mark Carney.
No, but they didn't levy any. To be fair, they didn't levy any counter tariffs. Mark Carney has, in fact, levied some, but not in a totally commensurate fashion. And then you criticize him for that, right? You said it's elbows down if you do that, but you're kind of lauding the elbows down approach of the Mexican government because it got them a better result with Trump. So which is it?
Well, it's that Mark Carney said that he would put in dollar-for-dollar tariffs, and now he's basically backed down on everything. What you don't do in a negotiation, what we're finding is that Mr. Carney, it was a real bait and switch for him to say he knew how to negotiate, because we're seeing him in action now. What you never do is threaten something and then withdraw the threat without getting anything in return. And he's backed down on dollar-for-dollar tariffs, on the DST, the digital services tax, on military spending, on all sorts of other things that he promised to Canadians and threatened to President Trump. And as a result, the president smells weakness. Now the Chinese see the same weakness, and they're hitting our farmers and fish harvesters. So we have far higher tariffs from both China and the U.S. today than when Mr. Carney took office, promising that he would end the tariffs.
But what would you like him to do, or what, I should reframe it, if you were Prime Minister, would you do? Because again, Mexico, you've just detailed, has a much better result. What they did was not put any counter tariffs on. They sent 10,000 troops to the border. Obviously, the problems at the border are different. Like, they are viewed as one of the many countries who, in essence, capitulated to the demands of Trump in order to better secure their economy. Even though it's not dollar for dollar, our government has not done that. Are you saying that you would have dollar-for-dollar tariffs? You'd have 50% counter tariffs, for example, on aluminum and steel?
To be clear, Mark Carney has capitulated. He's removed almost all of the counter tariffs. So
no, 25% remains on steel and aluminum.
He has capitulated on almost all of the counter tariffs. He's reversed himself on everything. What would I do? I'd pass the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which would make us more independent by opening our country for business. We would repeal all of the anti-energy laws and anti-resource laws, the Northwest BC coast shipping ban, the industrial carbon tax. I would make it so that capital gains tax is zero when businesses or investors reinvest their capital in Canada, opening mines, factories, pipelines, and other job-creating economic infrastructure that would make us more self-reliant and less dependent on other countries. So I've said to Mr. Carney, copy my idea. Take the Canadian Sovereignty Act, pass it into law. Let's unlock a massive building boom in this country through the power of free enterprise, and then we can go to the Americans and say, look, we actually do have options now because our economy is booming and our markets are growing. That's how you go and negotiate a solid deal.
It doesn't take someone with a degree in economics to look around and go, well, things aren't really turning out too well for the Canadian economy. And everything the Liberal government and Mark Carney has done simply hasn't worked.
That's how you go and negotiate a solid deal.
He sort of has, and I'll get you. I hope to get your take on this, right? Because with Bill C-5, it allows the government on a case-by-case or project-by-project basis to override many of the energy and climate laws that you just spelled out. I know that your position is.
Can I ask you a question?
I understand. Just let me finish for a moment,
Sure,
if I may.
please.
I understand your position is that the better signal would be to get rid of them altogether. But I've also heard you cite this LNG terminal off the coast of Germany quite frequently, how quickly they were able to get that built. The German government employed a piece of legislation almost identical to C-5 in order to accomplish that. Why, if that is a positive example for you, is that good enough there, but here you still remain critical of the approach?
So we all agree, this is where we can put partisanship aside. That we have the most resources in the world over here, but we have to get them developed and shipped over here. What's standing in the way? Liberal laws and liberal bureaucracies. Mark Carney's solution to too many liberal laws and bureaucracies is to create more laws and bureaucracies. Why not get rid of the barrier that the Liberals have put in place to begin with? Get out of the way. We've got 38 projects that are waiting federal approval today. Get out of the way, approve them. We have hundreds more, according to the premiers, that would come forward, but for fear by the investors that they will be entangled in bureaucracy and legal battles for years. So why not remove the bureaucracy and legal battles and open up our economy to all of those projects? So what we've had with Mr. Carney, by contrast, is he's keeping all of the Trudeau-era anti-development policies that 96 CEOs wrote the government last week saying they wanted removed so that they could start building. And all we've had from Mark Carney is that he has re-announced 5 projects that were more or less already approved, one of which is already under construction so that he can spike the football after someone else brought it into the end zone. Let's unlock the free enterprise system by removing liberal barriers and building everything everywhere.
So let's go back to a time when those barriers, those so-called barriers, didn't exist. I lived through a number of years where former Prime Minister Stephen Harper governed and signaled an openness to pipelines, for example. You cited Northern Gateway. The process that led to the federal government approving Northern Gateway was ultimately deemed by a court to be inadequate. I know that it's the Trudeau government that then decided not to appeal that decision, but it's not as though in the absence of the laws that you criticize, you saw booming resource development. In fact, even with the laws that were in place over the last 10 years, oil production in Alberta and Saskatchewan rose to record levels over the last 3 years.
So actually, oil production is rising everywhere. It doubled in the United States. It has risen far faster in the US than it has in Canada. Investment in Canadian oil has plummeted compared to the way it was 10 years ago. And as for, you want me to comment on the Harper era policies?
Well, no,
because there were 3 massive projects proposed in the Harper era and ready to build. But when Trudeau came in, he killed them. He killed Northern Gateway. And let's be clear, we have to get away from making excuses for the Liberals. Their cabinet made the decision to kill the Northern Gateway. No. They made a cabinet decision to kill the project. There's a record of decision by the cabinet that said we will not go ahead. It was, in fairness, it was an election promise. And by the way, Mark Carney testified in the industry committee that he opposed the Northern Gateway. Furthermore, on that subject of a pipe from northern Alberta to the Pacific coast, today Mark Carney and the Liberals have a ban on increased oil production to put the oil in the pipe, and a ban on shipping the oil out of the pipe.
Both of which they say C-5 would override if the case for it was there.
But they're 6 months in and they still haven't said they would override either of those things.
On a case-by-case basis, they have. Explicitly, I've interviewed the energy minister and he said so.
To be clear,
he said that C-5 could be used for that. I asked specifically.
Could be.
Yes, they haven't said would be, but it will have to be for LNG, for example. LNG Phase 2 would take emissions to a level that didn't fit in BC's climate plan, so they'll have to use it.
but they won't use it. So far, they have not said they will use it. They could do a lot of things, but they haven't done them. We're 6 months into the term. If you want a pipe from Alberta to the Pacific, you need to legalize the production of the oil going in the pipe and the shipping of the oil coming out of the pipe. Mark Carney has done neither, and he has not even announced he's done either. And that is why the company that was originally going to build Northern Gateway has already said they wouldn't even consider putting a shovel in the ground for such a project under Carney's current legal regime. But you know what they are doing? I'm talking about Enbridge now. They're building 2 pipelines in the United States of America, creating workers, jobs for American workers, American steel producers, American energy workers. Why is it that yet another Canadian company is taking billions of dollars out of Carney's liberal economy and sending it south? I want to bring that money back home, and we've got a plan to do it.
It's funny how she jumped back to the Harper era, and then when he corrected her on the Harper era, she went, no, I don't want to hear it. The way the mainstream media moves the goalpost in order to fit a narrative to prop up the current liberals is truly wild. Anyway, I would like to know what you think down in the comments section below. Hit that like button, hit that sub button if you are new, and thank you very much for watching.